So today we're going to go through Trainz layers and what they represent. So first let's start up Trainz. Wrong screen, there we go. And let's delete a few of these routes, clean a bit up. Okay. Let's create a new route. So we've got a fresh start. We'll call this layer test 1. Session name, we might leave it at default. Okay, so we've got nothing in our route at the moment, and we'll jump into the layer tab. Under the layer tab, you can see that there is a route layer by default and a session layer by default. Now, any route layers that you have will show up in the top section here. Any session layers that you have will show up in the bottom section. You can use the defaults. You can add new layers. So let's go route layer 2. We name that whatever we want. We know it's to be added to the route section, or you can add it to the session section, whichever you like. And it just shows up there. So now we've got a second route layer, and you can have up to 64 of these in the top half where the route layers go, and you can have 64 session layers. So just try to keep it under that. I'm pretty sure that's a bit overkill if you go beyond that, but that's the limits. Now, what can we do with these? Anything that is in a route layer will show up in any sessions you create because it is part of the route. It's bound to the route itself. So if you create a session on top of this, any edits you make, placing these trees, we've got it in route layer 2. We place all these trees down. You're going to find, if I save this, exit Surveyor, do you want to save? Yes, I do. So it's saving it as the new route and session. The session's default. So it's now saved those trees in the route layer itself. So if I go to layer test 1, edit route, those trees will show up again because they were in my route layer or one of the route layers. If we jump out, for example, if we now create a session layer, or we could use the default one, but I'll just make another one. Session layer 2, and it's in add to the session. So now we've selected session layer 2. Let's add a different type of tree. And just make it pretty obvious where they are. We then save, and even if we save the new route and the session at the moment is default, remember. We've saved that, and we'll jump out of Surveyor. If we go to edit our route again, because we saved those additional trees in the session layer, they now belong to default. So see, we've loaded the route up and the trees are now gone. They are not in this session layer, and the session layer doesn't even exist because we've saved that as default. So if we jump back out, we go and edit our session, view sessions. We do have 2 there. That's interesting. So let's edit one of them. So it's not the first one. Probably better to name your sessions correctly so I remember. Let's get rid of that one. So you'll find that this one has the trees in it now. So there they are there, because that's part of our session 2 layer that we saved. So session layers will be saved in the session itself. Route layers and anything to do with the objects that are saved in those layers will be the route, and those will transfer onto multiple sessions that you create. But anything in the sessions, you are not going to be able to create a new session and have them show up. They only belong to the session that you save. So now that that's clear, the next thing to say is if you make any terrain changes, for instance, we start raising it, we paint it, whatever, add water, adjust height, add more terrain if you decide to add another piece of terrain. The terrain itself isn't route or session layers. It's its own special layer that it will always be saved with the route itself. And it doesn't matter what you've got selected here. It won't be affected. The terrain itself won't be affected by layers. It's always going to be saved with the route. So just bear that in mind. Excuse me. So let's jump back out and go into edit our route. You don't have to do that actually. You can stay in the session as long as you just save the route and do everything in the route layers. It will affect the route in turn. So you don't need to keep jumping out from a session and into the route itself. Okay, so let's have a look at other things what you can do with layers. If you've got a pretty heavy route, or you plan on putting a lot of detail into your route, you might want to consider putting certain things on different layers. So we might have our track and make sure we've always got track selected, and choose our track and start placing it around the place so that you know that if you have lots of track and there might be a performance issue, or you might want to put two different types of track down, you can easily hide and show to see what things look like. So you can turn on different parts of the map. Just say you've got two different types of track that you've laid. You can test each one to see what they look like. Or you might have a very detailed map and you mightn't be able to select an object to move it around. Say that object was hidden behind buildings and whatnot. You can jump into your layers, provided you've got them neatly ordered, and you might turn off the building layer in order to find something behind it. So they're quite handy to have. Also, you can lock things so that if you find yourself moving the wrong object, if they're locked, you're not going to be able to move them at all until that layer becomes unlocked, which is another really handy feature that allows you to a bit of greater editing power there. Then we can, like I was saying before, we can performance test things. So if you find that you're using certain objects throughout your map, maybe we just have a bit of grass somewhere. Yeah, that grass just will be fine. So you go into your route layer, you'd add grass. You can name your layers whatever you want. You can have several of these, and then we go into the object itself and start laying our grass around, and you find that you've got a lot of polygons floating around and your route's starting to chug a little bit perhaps. You can go in and find out what the objects are that are causing the issues. So perhaps it's grass. You can turn them off and have a bit of a play and see whether your performance or your frame rate goes up or not. And if that is the issue, you can jump back and start editing again. So it splits a lot of stuff up, which is good. And then you can look at using rules to hide and show layers as well. So I'm doing all these in the route layer because I want to save it. If I'm going to create a session, all this will be saved for the session. But let's let's save this, and let's say we will add a session layer, call it S1, and in this session layer we might put some the Kenua. There you go. I'll put the locomotive and its tender. So now I haven't saved the loco and the tender in the route. I've just saved it in the session layer there, so that if I want to make more sessions down the track, I won't actually have this blocking any any rails or anything because it's part of another session. So I'm going to save that. Save as, and I will call it train 1. That's my new session. So if I go out, just for example again, and I create, if I edit the route, you'll find it won't be part of the route anymore. So it's gone. It's part of the session I saved because I put it in the session layer. And then if I jump into here, and I go train 1, you're going to find that it's sitting in there. There you go. So it's part of the session now. And if I create a new session, it will be gone. So I can start afresh, and I can put different trains down. I can change the route if I like, or the session itself for a new session. I'm going to jump out and go back to editing my train 1 session so we can play around with layers a little bit more. So we edit that session. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you a little way of hiding some layers, or a layer, with rules. So we'll put a trigger there. So when our train goes and hits the trigger, we're going to I've already made session, let's go S2 for the next layer, and I'm going to put a bunch of trees on the track. There we go. And we're gonna find that it's on that layer. Yep. So S2, when the train hits this trigger, set trigger radius. Let's set it to 5. There we go. So when the train hits this trigger, session layer 2, or S2, is going to disappear. Now, in order to configure that, jump into our rules. And this is just another thing you can do with layers. This is not a rules tutorial, just for anyone who's getting a bit scared with rules. Hide, no, we want weight. We'll put a weight down. No, sorry, completely wrong. Trigger check. And we add our trigger, which is T1. Any trains, done. And we then go show hide layer. Make that a child of the trigger check. We want to hide S2. That's it. It says when the trigger, any trains are accepted, and trigger 1, when it gets hit, we're going to go to our child rule. It's a show hide layer, and the layer is hide S2. That's it. Very simple. So now, in our session, when we go to drive it, you will see that as we get closer to the trigger and we actually touch it, we're going to find that the S2 layer will disappear. And this is a fairly poor example, but it's there's a lot of ways you can use this to enhance your gameplay or your sessions for people and yourself. Stop. There we go. So the trigger was about there. The layer's now gone because we touched it. But there's many ways you can set that up and utilize it for different things. So that's just another way of using layers. In addition, what else will we show? You can change, just say you had everything under the one layer and you haven't made your route quite as effective with layers as you would have liked. Let's throw a whole bunch of stuff on a layer, and then we'll try and split it up. And let's try and remember what we're putting down. Building 2, that'll do. So we've put a whole bunch of buildings around the place, and perhaps a water tower as well. And we found that we've laid a lot of stuff down, and it's all gone into the route layer, or a particular layer where we wished we had broken it up. What you can do is you can go main menu, bulk asset update replace. You can find the asset you wanted, which I believe it was this one. It says asset to update. We throw it in there, and then it goes randomly move a percentage of scenery objects to a layer. So I'm going to create the layer I want, and it might be in the routes layer, the routes section. So let's go R1, and we will jump back out of there again. Bulk asset update replace. We then put our object in here, keeping in mind that those buildings are on that default layer, and we'll also, while we're at it, get the water tower as well. I know it's that object. Okay, so we've got two objects in the list. We then randomly move 100% of the senior objects to a layer, and then we can select R1, which is the layer that we chose to create, and we go begin, and that's it. Now you've got all those objects, instead of being on the default route layer, you've now got them on a new layer. So you can actually do that, which makes it fairly handy to move a lot of things quickly to a new layer if you need to. And another cool little nifty thing is the binding of existing route objects to session layers. Now that might be a mouthful, but I'll show you what I mean by that. Let's save this in case we want to come back to it. Oh, we overwrote the route as well. That's okay. We'll only save what's in the route layers. And for example, let's load up Kickstarter County. We can't edit the route because it's built in, but we can create a new session. So this is handy for DLC or built-in assets that you can't edit a route on, but you wish you could clear a section of that route and put something else down. So let's work over here. Let's just say I didn't want all these factories around here, but because this is a built-in route, I can't actually do anything about that per se. So this change will require a route resave clone, but the underlying route is payware and cannot be edited. So I don't really want to clone it. I'd like to clear this and add something else there. So what I can do, or you can use it, we can clear the rail. You can do anything with this, but I'm just going to take the buildings for example. Let's add a session layer, and we'll call it S1, but you can call it whatever you want. Then what you can do is you can jump in here and select the question mark and go that one, and you've got bound layer, which is what we're going to do is take that object and bind it to my new layer I just made called S1. And when I do that, I now have a little bit of control over what the visibility of this object will be. See how I can turn it on and off now? So if I was to turn that off and play the session that I created, that no longer exists. So I can put other things down in its place. So I potentially don't clone the actual route. I can just edit the existing route itself. So it's quite handy, and I might find something where I want to put something in its place, which obviously that's not what I want to put down, but again, you might want to find yourself getting some track object, going question mark on the track, putting it in the layer that's hidden, and again I'll lay some different track there so that I can rebuild an entire section of the map without actually cloning the map itself. So there's quite a powerful little tool within itself there for layering. And the final thing that I will show you with layers is the the merge tool where you can merge two routes together. I'll just jump into another version of Trainz that I have running. It's just loading up. And I have a route that I've made, so if we just jump into edit route, so there's this little route that I've made. Again, it's an example route, but you can do it with any existing routes. And we will jump out of there and go and add or create a new route. Create a new route and call it N2. And we'll add a couple of baseboards. And I'm going to put the other baseboard there when I merge the route together. So now this is my existing route. We'll save that. Go menu and then merge route. And we will merge it with the one I made before, which was new route. And we have to move this around to where we want it. So you'll see that these are the existing ones in my route, and then this one that I'm moving around is the new route name that I selected before, the other route. So I'm going to put it there, which will turn up over here. So if you wanted to look at the map that way, I guess you could. And then it's got a conflict, which is why this is red. So we click on it, and it says one or more layers have the same name. Names must be unique. So we're going to have to rename one of these or merge one of these. So if we go, or delete one of these. But if we go merge, and we'll just merge both the route layers together, now we've only got one route layer. So we tick the box there, and you'll see that that previous route has now showed up in my map here. So that's how you can merge two maps together as well, using layers as well to see where you want to put it. You can put it on different layers as well, pending that you've got those layers created before you do the merge. So I hope that helps you understand layers a little bit more. It can make your workflow rather versatile and a lot easier if you understand them and use them. And if you require any other information on layers that you find you're not quite sure, please let us know on the Twitch TV Trainz forum or in the comments of this video, and we'll chase it up. Thanks for watching.